I have never seen the law firm industry having there be so much demand for work and so many firms that are hiring. All my clients are hiring. Most firms I know are hiring. It is going like gangbusters. And you couple that with the shortage in talent. It has never been a more competitive environment that I've seen for hiring attorneys. And so any advantage that a firm can have around, bringing on board the right attorney is going to really be a big differentiator, um, you know, right now and probably well into the future.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Answering Legal's Everything Except the Law podcast. I am your host, Nick Werker. If this is your first time tuning in, this is the podcast where we share expert advice on all the parts of running a law firm that attorneys weren't exactly trained for back in law school. Now, we all know that in order to successfully manage and grow a law practice, you need trustworthy people around you. However, finding reliable staff members can often be an extremely difficult process. If you feel that you can relate to this struggle, then you'll definitely want to tune in for this episode. Our guest today is a speaker, business coach, and author of the book, Staffing Up, The Attorney's Guide to Hiring Top Talent. Alay Yajnik is here. Welcome to the show, Alay.
Nick, thank you so much for having me on today. I appreciate it.
I tell everybody this, I appreciate you being on more than you appreciate me. I will put that in writing. Can you just tell the audience a little bit more about yourself, your background, who you are?
Yeah, absolutely. So, what we do, we work with small law firms. So, these usually have 10 attorneys or so, sometimes a lot less, and we work with them all across the country. We have a team of consultants and coaches, and what we are trying to do, our mission is to help these attorneys who are trying to be attorney entrepreneurs. So they're trying to be a practicing attorney as well as grow their law firm. Help them do that faster and easier than they could on their own by really implementing business best practices into their firms, because when they do that, income goes up, quality of life goes up. They're able to take real vacations. You know the drill, Nick. And so we're blessed and we're proud, and that's to be able to provide that service for the legal profession.
That's awesome. And recently I have a friend who's like an entrepreneur, and we were going over, where we could possibly open a coffee shop and all this stuff. And I don't think we give attorneys enough credit that they're just regular people who went to school for like an extra 3 years, right? Incredibly smart, diligent people. And then we're like, hey, if you want to really like live a good life, you have to become an entrepreneur and go out there and build a business from the ground up and learn how to service people and do all this stuff. So I love having people like you on the show because, you know, being an entrepreneur is so hard. And then being an entrepreneur on top of keeping up with all like just everything of being a lawyer to me is just the thought of like, this guy was like, hey, we should open a coffee shop. It would be really cool. And I'm like spinning about it. I'm like, oh my God, I can't imagine being an entrepreneur on top of being a lawyer. So I had to put that out there, just my personal life. So
Yeah, it is unbelievable, Nick. I'm so glad you brought that up, because it's actually a lot more than just, being an ordinary person and going to school. If you think about it, and as we've gone through our professional careers, for most of us who are not lawyers, like myself, I'm not a lawyer. We do other things, right? We're involved in business, so we get exposed to all the business. Then we learn about things. We read about business. We read about entrepreneurship. Imagine if you go through your undergrad, then you go into law school where it's all about the law and nothing else. And then when you get done with law school, you join a firm where it's all about practicing law and nothing else. And when you do continuing education, it's about the law. It's not about running a law firm as a business or any of these things. So as you progress in your career as an attorney, all your time is spent focused on practicing, interpreting, using the law, helping clients. But all the business development, all the business management, all of those things you have never been exposed to. And now you're stepping out on your own. You're setting up this firm and you're going, oh my gosh, what is accounting? What is marketing? how do I hire people? How do I run? What does a law firm culture look like? All these business topics are hitting you, and you've got to absorb all of that while you're still practicing the law. It's nuts. There's
It's
very few industries that do that.
it's really nuts, and that's why, I mean, you're such a a powerful guest to have on the show today, because I was just thinking about this too. So I want to talk about your book for a second. So your book, Staffing Up, offers a proven system for hiring high quality people for any role in your law firm. Um, and like we just said, like, lawyers, they go to school and they study just the law. They go to a firm and they practice just the law. Nothing is really taught to them that would give them the ability to like run a business and be an entrepreneur. So it's really important to have good people around you that can help you run this business. So can you tell us a little bit about what motivated you to write the book on this particular topic?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. And I've got a copy here. We'll see if the camera picks it up. But what I wanted to showcase is the fact that it's very thin. And the reason it's thin is it's written for attorneys who don't have a lot of time. Um, I get this question a lot, Nick. And so thank you for asking. People ask me, so Alay, you help law firms grow. You spend a lot of time talking with them about business development and how to generate and build a book of business. Why are you writing a book about hiring? It makes no sense to me. And the reason I do that is, when I work with clients, oftentimes what ends up happening is we'll work on their business development. We'll work on their whole end-to-end process from lead generation all the way through to client conversion and then getting referrals after that. But what ends up happening is we hit a ceiling very quickly. Their capacity gets full with clients, but they still want to grow. The only way for them to do that is to hire. And I realize that they are really not well equipped to hire. And there aren't any good resources that I found specifically for lawyers that teach them how to hire the right employees.
Hmm.
So to identify who to hire, how to hire them, and then what happens after that hiring decision is made so that they are a success in the law firm. And so that's why I wrote the book, is to fill that gap.
I love it. And, you know, I participate in running a business. I don't run this place by myself. There's a lot of employees here and there's a lot of moving parts. Um, but when I do set out to hire somebody, I know what I'm looking for. Um, because it it's it's sort of it's kind of easy for me, right? Because I don't need to quiz somebody on like, do you know torts? Do you know civil liability? Do you know bankruptcy? Do you know criminal defense? Were you a prosecutor? What's your experience? So I imagine that hiring another lawyer for a lawyer, fairly easy. What's your credentials? What law school did you go to? Um, but for me, I know what I need, and we talk about this, that lawyers don't know what it takes when they first start. I don't mean this to be an insult, but they don't know what it takes to start hiring people when they're looking to grow. So can you talk about like some common mistakes that you see growing law firms make when it comes to hiring, and what people should be looking for when it comes to hiring?
Yeah, how much time do we have?
Ha.
And we cover a lot of this in the book, and one of the things we'll probably come back to over and over again is that hiring is just the start of bringing on a successful employee. In fact, the real work really starts when they say yes and come on board.
Mhm.
But we'll talk about that in a moment. So some of the key issues that I find key mistakes they make is they hire too late. Number one. So because they want to save on on expenses, they wait until they're totally jammed with business, until they can't take another client, until they're turning clients away, and then they think about hiring somebody, and that creates some problems. Number one, they're so busy they don't have time to conduct the search and to do it properly. Number two, they are in a hurry. They're desperate to find
Mhm.
someone to bring on board. So they're likely to make a poor decision, right? It increases the chances of that happening. And then number three, if the person does come on board, they still have to train them and onboard them. And oftentimes that falls by the wayside because they're just so happy to have someone on board. They'd immediately shove workload their way, and then they're upset when the workload isn't done to the quality and and the format that they expect.
Mhm.
So those are probably the top three issues that I find that attorneys run into when they're looking to hire somebody.
That's interesting. So, I always see of I look at hiring, especially in my department, as a need. Um, but I like that concept that like you should be more proactive in your hiring than reactive, especially if you're looking to grow. Because you don't want to be desperate. You don't want to bring in candidates that maybe, they check a couple of boxes for you. Um, you're confident that you can train them and that they can hit the ground running. But if you're really busy and you're turning work away, you could make a poor decision. You want to have that, I don't want to say like a lengthy period of time where you can make a decision, because ultimately you should know what you're looking for, and it's kind of a yes or no thing. But yeah, you don't want to be desperate when you're going out for hiring, because you could end up hiring the wrong person and then you're really in a pickle. And when it comes down to states, you could really be in a pickle. And I'm sure people listening from different parts of the country either know what I'm talking about or don't agree with what I'm talking about, but that's okay. Um, so we know that hiring is not an exact science, but is there anything law firms can do before their, wow, I just smacked the microphone, before their hiring process begins to improve their odds of finding a high quality employee and connecting ultimately with a high quality employee?
Yeah, in fact, the first part of the book is dedicated to hiring habits, where we talk about things that they should be doing all the time. Just get in the habit of doing these things because it's going to help them when they look to hire somebody. And one of the rules that we preach in our book is always be hiring. You might have heard always be closing, right? The Glenn
Yep.
Ross quote. So always be hiring. You should always have your eyes and ears open for great quality talent that you want to bring on board. And we talk about building your dream team or your A team, right? Building those people that you say, you know what, if I had to wave a magic wand, these are the people that I would love to have on my team. It may not make sense now, but you never know down the road when you'll have an opening and they'll be ready to come on board. And boom, it just happens. Or they oftentimes know people who are of a similar caliber as they are. So if you ask them, hey, who do you know? Here's the role that I have. Who do you know that might be a good fit? Two things might happen. Number one, they might raise their hand and say, what about me? Which would be great. Number two, they're also likely to say, I know somebody from law school or a colleague or something like that. And they're likely to be a high quality person because they're referred by another high quality person. So yeah, always having um, your radar up, making connections, building relationships with other attorneys that you really trust and admire and respect, because you never know when the stars are going to align, and they'll be able to help you out and hire.
So that's really interesting. So I have my own opinions about interview questions. And again, I need different things than a lawyer who's running a law practice really needs. So when it comes to interviewing people for positions at a firm, are there any specific questions that you recommend lawyers ask? And if not specific, what do you recommend that lawyers do when interviewing people?
Absolutely. So, and all the employment attorneys who are listening will appreciate this. So, before you go ahead and create your interview questions, please check with your employment law attorney. There are rules by state that basically regulate the kinds of questions that you cannot ask. And so, those rules change all the time. I'm going to throw out some questions that I think are legal in the state of California. But again, check with your employment law attorney before you use any of these questions. Um, so one of the questions that I like to ask is it's actually a style of interviewing. It's called behavioral interviewing, where you ask them to tell a story about a time when they did something. So tell me about a time when you actually went to a networking organization and built some referral relationships and how that worked out for you, right? Or tell me about a time when you had a really, really challenging client. What did you do to give them a great result and to make them satisfied? And so by asking those open-ended questions, so tell me about a time, um, those kinds of things, it forces them to provide more than a yes, no answer. They now have to elaborate and they have to tell a story. And in the course of telling the story, it may lead to other questions. It's also harder to make up an answer when you're telling a long story. It's far easier to do it with a yes or a no type thing. So asking those behavioral style questions is good. The other thing I'd encourage you to do is give some thought beforehand about what the values are for your firm. And the values, as I define them, are the unspoken promises that you make to other members of your firm, to your clients, and to your colleagues. And the reason that's so important is you want other people joining the firm that share the same values. Once you understand what those values are, you can then ask questions that will elicit responses that will tell you, is this person a good fit with our organization or not? For example, if one of your values is fun, you might want to ask, what does a fun workplace look like to you? And see what they say. And the third thing is do not be afraid to use tests. I can't tell you how often this happened. One of the reasons why I wrote the book was I would be working with a client. I'd say, go hire somebody, and they would. And then this attorney comes in and they don't do the work. And all of a sudden they realize, oh my gosh, this attorney basically exaggerated their skill set. They don't have the skills, they don't have the quality, and it's just a complete miss. And so what we found is that implementing tests for candidates is really, really helpful. It helps reduce the likelihood that someone's going to join with a skill set that's a mismatch for the role.
So I love the idea of testing, and I think people get really turned off at the idea of testing employees or doing maybe a trial run of having an employee come in, because they think, oh, well, that's going to be a waste of money. I'm going to pay this person to come in and then it's not going to work out, or I'm going to pay to train them and then, that's lost money. But it's really not. What you're really doing is saving money by finding out if there is a problem that could have been avoided in the long run. And that's something that I'm pretty sure I was allowed to do. I spoke to HR before I did it, but when I made a hire, I asked them, would you be willing to come in and work a full day on a trial basis? We'll pay you, obviously, and see how it goes. And for us, that was really important in evaluating, is this person like a good fit for us for an 8-hour workday? Do I want to like wring this person's neck? Are they annoying? Do they have any bad habits? Are they a good worker? And it's like the airport test too. Can you sit in an airport with this person? And all that stuff is so important because you're going to be spending a lot of time with this person. We spend a lot of time at work, and the interview questions I always find so interesting. When I was getting ready to like go join the working world, I remember I had a friend who he got a second or third interview at Google, and we went through all of the possible Google interview questions together and tried to come up with good responses for them maybe ahead of time so that, he would have something to say to these really abstract questions. And I remember thinking, what's the point of asking somebody, if you were shrunk down to the size of like a baby carrot and you fell into a blender, what would you do in order to get out of the blender if there's a 5-minute timer and the blender is going to turn on? And you might think that's a stupid question. I'm never going to be shrunk down to the size of a baby carrot and put in a blender, and there's no timer. It's not going to happen. It's not realistic. It doesn't make any sense. But it's sort of like how you're explaining these behavioral questions. They just want to see that you'd be able to formulate any sort of plan, and speak in coherent sentences and come up with an idea and maybe a creative idea at that, especially at Google. I'm sure they're looking for creativity more than anything. It's just important to know what you're looking for. So I want to,
Yeah, I agree. And I'm a big process guy, when I do a lot of the work that we do with our firms. And so a lot of what we talk about in the book is setting that up as a process so that it's repeatable. So we use checklists. We have different interview formats that clients can choose from. And the idea is they create a battery of questions, and the whole hiring process is the same for each client. And so as a client advances through the interviewing process, things change. But for any two clients that are moving through the interview process, they're going to have the same experience, and we're going to get the same amount of information. And that's really helpful for proving legality, right? Because we want to make sure that our hiring processes don't discriminate. But it's also helpful in just easing the stress in the firm when they're looking to hire somebody, because interviewing someone can be such a disruption. Right? You have to deal with scheduling interviews, processing candidates, and then thinking about, oh my gosh, this person might join the firm. Are they a great fit? There's a lot of anxiety that goes in when someone is potentially joining the firm. And so I find that putting things into a repeatable process reduces that quite a bit.
Yeah. And you just made me realize how lucky and fortunate I am. Maybe I'll send a nice thank you gift or note to the HR department here, who takes a lot of that burden off of me. And now we're sizable enough to have had that. But you're right. Back in the day when you're a smaller company, you have an HR rep, obviously, through whatever staffing or payroll company that you use, I'm sure for legality purposes. But I have somebody here who's like an expert in OSHA and all of that and takes care of that for me, so I don't have to worry about that. But so you wrote the book Staffing Up before the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic.
I
What kind
did.
of effect, if any, have the events of that whole thing, the past year and a half, had on the hiring process for law firms?
Yeah, well, it's really blown it up. Um, I have never seen the law firm industry having there be so much demand for work, and so many firms that are hiring. All my clients are hiring. Most firms I know are hiring. It is going like gangbusters. And you couple that with the shortage in talent. It has never been a more competitive environment that I've seen for hiring attorneys. And so, any advantage that a firm can have around, bringing on board the right attorney is going to really be a big differentiator. Um, you know, right now and probably well into the future.
Yeah, it's something that I hear about, but I don't necessarily deal with on a day-to-day basis is like the labor shortage. But I have read a few articles that there's not really a labor shortage. There's kind of a labor mismatch right now. So, there's a lot of people I'm sure applying to jobs at law firms, but maybe not meeting the standards of what they're looking for. But one of the things that, and I actually run into this a lot. So one of the biggest problems for growing law practices is employee turnover. Um, is there anything that you recommend law firms do to help retain quality staff members for longer periods of time?
Yeah, there is quite a bit. And we actually just did a podcast on this, where I interviewed an attorney that's done just that. Um, but a lot of this starts with bringing on board the right employee. And I mentioned earlier, making sure that their values are a good fit for the organization. So you want to make sure that happens. If you're a small law firm, like most of my clients are, you're not going to be able to compete with big law on money. They're going to be able to pay your attorney more than you can pay your attorney. So you have to compete with those firms in other ways. And one of the key ways to do it is in flexibility. So providing a little bit more latitude with regards to how often they need to be in the office, where they live, um, flexible work schedules. There is a large there's a large pool of attorneys who have family obligations. And so maybe not requiring them to work as many hours as other attorneys, and, pay them accordingly, of course, but they appreciate having that flexibility, not having to say, okay, I'm either 100% in as an attorney for this firm, or I'm 0% and I'm not going to be a part of it. But having something in the middle, like, I'm 75, 80% in. And then when my obligations go away, then I'll ramp up and I'll be totally in. It's just right now I'm not in that position. So being a little bit more flexible there can also give these firms an edge, because then they're able to tap into a large pool of attorneys that don't right now have a role in a firm. So flexibility, I think, is really important. Um, and then as far as long-term retention, just showing some appreciation for these people, making sure that they feel like they're a part of the firm. It's oftentimes not about money. Why they leave for other reasons. Um, and so you want to make sure that the only reason that they would leave the firm, if they left, was due to money, because everything else is great. And the money issue can even be addressed if they're the right employee, and as as a partner, or managing partner, you've laid out the path for them at the firm for the next 5-10 years. Here's what's possible if you stay with the firm. Here's how you can grow professionally. If they have that path laid out and they're enjoying their current situation, it's going to be very hard for anyone else to pry them away from your firm.
We will be right back with the show after this short message.
My name is Brian Perskin. I'm the managing partner of Brian D. Perskin Associates PC. I started out with answering legal, and now my practice has grown tenfold. The biggest benefit to answering legal is my phones are answered 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because the lifeblood of any law firm are new clients. Answering legal is an extension of my firm. I feel that every receptionist at Answering Legal works for me. It allows lawyers and paralegals to actually work without answering the phone. Anytime I leave this office, I know my business is still running. I would recommend it to any lawyer that wants to make their lives easier. You need Answering Legal.
I find that, and I say this often, is that you can buy loyalty, but you don't necessarily buy it with money. And I know a lot of people don't like Gary Vaynerchuk, but I watched this speech that Gary Vaynerchuk gave a few years ago where he was talking about kind of this similar issue, like, why are my employees leaving? And he's like, well, you have to have those conversations with them. It can't just be an anonymous thing where, okay, maybe this person will get a raise. Oh, it's only coming up that they want to take off this day, and, have conversations and find out what's important to people. So maybe you have a conversation with one of your employees and you find out that family is really important to him. And so you work with him to create a more flexible schedule. And one of your other employees really wants to make a lot of money. It's really important to her to make a ton of money. Well, maybe she doesn't need as much flexibility and she can get a pay raise, and you can talk about working more and other paths to create more money. Some people like titles. Maybe you can give this person a title promotion and add on to their responsibility. But it's really all about finding, and like you said, finding people who fit your values, but also understanding what their values are and being able to cater to them, because we don't really have a one size fits all approach, right? Especially if you want to decrease turnover.
Right.
And I'm just always trying to find ways to be a better leader and connect with people. So I try my best. I don't have all the power in the world for anybody who listens to this who it cares at all about my opinion. What were you gonna
And
say? I'm
Nick,
sorry.
I want to jump in here and just make something really clear, because I know you have a lot of attorneys that listen and they might be thinking, oh my gosh, so I just need to give my employees whatever they want. That's not the kind of firm that I run. And I just want to say that, being flexible does not mean caving in and just letting your employees run the show and giving them whatever they want. In fact, the employees that are going to leave your firm first are going to be your best employees, right? The mediocre ones will hang around as long as possible because they like collecting the paycheck. So by raising the bar and ensuring that everyone at the firm is, a grade A employee, a high performer, that's going to raise the bar for everybody else. And some of the lower performing employees may leave, which is okay, because your rock star employees are going to stay and they are going to want to work with other rock stars. So when we talk about flexibility, it's about being understanding and respecting their personal situation and delivering what they need in a job. It's not about reducing your standards for performance. That should still remain high.
You just reminded me of again, here I go with like the famous person corny quotes, but Richard Branson said somebody asked him, what if we train all our employees and make them really great, like rock stars, and they leave? He's like, well, what if we don't and they stay? And so you really should try to, and yes, don't let them just run amok and do nothing. But if you have a good employee and you don't want them to leave, well, you might want to cave to a few of their demands if you care. If you don't, then I don't know why you're listening to this podcast. So time management, right, is always a major struggle for those who are running growing law firms for a lot of different reasons that we could talk about for the next 2 hours. How much will hiring quality people make it easier for lawyers to manage their time and enjoy a bit more time away from their work?
Yeah, that's a great question, because in my personal philosophy is that time is our most precious asset. It's our most precious asset because we can't buy more of it. Um, it's perishable. You can't save it up. Um, and time is money, and that certainly applies in law firm space as well. So yeah, time is our most precious asset. So hiring people has to save time. There's two challenges to that. One is if a firm waits too long to hire an employee, then it's going to take away from the billable hours of the attorney to hire that person, because they have to invest the time to find the right person. That's going to take time. And then they have to invest more time to train that person. So that is also going to take more time. So in the short term, that is going to be maybe a hit if you wait too long to hire somebody. If you time it right, the impact short term can be minimal. Maybe a little bit of a loss of profitability, but oftentimes what ends up happening is you just pull back on the business development a little bit and spend some of that time in biz dev, spend it on hiring and training instead. And so that way you don't have a financial hit to the firm. You bring on board this other person, and then once they're rocking and rolling, then you get back to biz dev, and you can now take advantage of the higher capacity that you have. So from that perspective, it can definitely save time. And then for people that don't want to do it themselves, they can always work with consultants. We offer, some of those services. There's recruiters out there, and there's other part-time staff that you can hire that will screen the resumes and, maybe even do the first round of phone screens for you if that's something you want to do.
I like the idea that time is perishable. What you were saying, and yet there's so many things that you can do that really kind of take away what I would call like the remedial aspects of hiring somebody, and certainly getting a consultant to help you either weed out candidates or hone in on the best candidates, and then you go through yourself and look over resumes and see if there's things that jump out to you, and have conversations with those people and see, are you making a connection? Is this person really speaking to what you're looking for as it pertains to the values of your firm, like we're talking about? But time is a really non-renewable resource, right? And there are very few people, I think, or very few other professions that are as time consuming as being a lawyer. So
That's
are there
true.
any other tips that you can provide lawyers when it comes to improving their work-life balance?
Yeah, and again, how much time do we have? But one of them is, and it ties into our conversation about time and getting more of that back, and hiring, because when you have a team around you, that's when you can take those 2-week vacations, 3-week vacations, 6-week vacations, where you don't have to work. And I know this is weird for attorneys, but there is a way that you can structure your firm. We do it all the time, where you as the managing partner can take weeks off and not have to actually work. I know it's strange, but you can actually enjoy time with your family instead of sitting in your hotel and answering email. Unless that's something you want to do. And if you want to do that, more power to you. But the team, and having a really good team in place, is how you unlock that opportunity. So that's the carrot, right? Maybe you want to take a 2-week vacation, or you're already taking a 2-week vacation. You want to do 3 or 4, something like that. I managed to take a month off in my firm, and now I do it every year. COVID accepted, but once that's done, we're going to get back to it. And I just work an 11-month year. It took me 2 years to structure my firm for that, but now I have the right pieces in place, systems and people, that I can step away for that long and things continue to run without a hitch. And we've done the same thing for law firms. So that's one thing I would suggest, is hiring people. The second thing is, we teach something called the 20-10-5 rule. And this is for most attorneys who are not litigators. We have a litigator version of the firm of the rule, but it's not as catchy. So we're going to stick with the 20-10-5 rule.
Nice.
And this breaks down how much time you should be spending in a week. So 20 hours a week, client work, 10 hours a week business development and marketing, and 5 hours a week on law firm administration. And if you add all that up, it's 35 hours a week, which is a lot less than most attorneys work. But if you do that and you have a small firm, because you have lower overhead, you can have a very strong and high performing firm from a financial standpoint. And if you find yourself consistently exceeding that 20 hours a week, you're spending more time in client work than that, that is a clear signal that you need to go hire somebody. And you're going to be able to do that because you have the time to go hire them and train them up.
So I love that model because there's a clear cut point at which you realize I'm doing too much work, right? I need to alleviate some of this from me. And that's the main thing about hiring, right? Is if you hire somebody and then you have to work more managing them, I think that's another telltale sign that you maybe hired the wrong person. But you hire somebody so that you can do something else. You want to alleviate part of your job, maybe that you're not good at, or maybe that you don't have enough time for, to another person. So I think that's, having a model like that, I love it, is that, if you find yourself working more than 20 hours, you need to hire somebody. That's cool.
Yeah.
So you have your own podcast. We hope everyone will go check it out. Obviously, there's going to be a link in the description down below. I sound like one of those corny YouTubers. I know. Oh my God, that hurts so bad. Called Lawyer Business Advantage. So I want to know, because I obviously have enjoyed almost a year of, I think maybe more than a year of doing this. And I've had some really great, well, thank you. I've had some great, interesting conversations and learned a lot of, I'm going to say, cool things from a lot of really interesting people. So what are some of the most interesting lessons that you've learned so far from doing a podcast?
Well, you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that lawyers are people, and hearing their stories about the things that they're going through and the evolutions of their legal career, their personal challenges, their professional challenges, and how they've overcome those just reinforces that, is that they are, people. And as attorneys who are listening, I know it's no surprise, but for those of us who are not attorneys, it might be a little bit of a surprise. So they have, similar challenges that we do, but a lot of times those challenges are exacerbated by the fact that they're in an incredibly high stress profession. It has one of the highest incidences of, substance abuse, heart attacks, strokes. If you're an attorney, you've heard all this stuff before. So that is something that kind of pulled the veil back for me. And I really got to get a sense for, oh my gosh, this is a really, really high stress industry. A lot of them are always on. They're always on, morning, afternoon, nighttime. They're always going vacation, you name it. That's also pretty unique to this industry, although it doesn't have to be that way. And that's something that we work with them on. And probably the third thing is, being an attorney, it's what I would consider a noble profession. When someone hires an attorney, they don't hire an attorney for fun. They hire an attorney because they're going through one of the most challenging times in their life, whether it's on the personal side or on the professional side. That's when an attorney gets brought in. So the stakes are very, very high. And I really appreciate that. And that can be tough, dealing with that all the time. And so what we do on Lawyer Business Advantage is we interview other attorneys that are doing the good work of being an attorney and also building their law firm in interesting ways. And we have those conversations, and I always get some insights out of it. I'll share with you one insight real quick, which is that when they are, doing business development or marketing, oftentimes the attorneys I've talked to that have built really prestigious firms, they're out there in the community. They're finding ways to serve. And because they're an attorney, they get opportunities back to them. But that's not why they do it. They serve because they have a skill set and they can help. And so if I had to give anyone any advice about, non-hiring, is if you're an attorney, you have a unique skill set. A lot of people in your community, whatever that community is, can benefit from your skill set. So find ways to give back to the community, because it will come back to you.
I appreciate that a lot. And I love to see not just attorneys, but anybody who has a particular skill set really giving back to a community. But I again, I could talk about this. I meet people sometimes. I go into like a store I'm like, you got to throw me out, man, because I just will stand here and talk to you all day. I'm holding up the line. It's crazy, man. I just can't stop talking. Um, so before we go today, can you let's do a shameless self promo here. Can you tell us, can you tell our audience where they can find your book and your podcast?
Yeah, sure. Just go to my website, lawfirmsuccessgroup.com, and there's links there for both the book and the podcast. And we also have a strategic planning toolkit. We're getting that time of year where it's a good time to reevaluate your strategic plan, your business plan for the year, or if you don't have one, it's got the template, it has a training video, and it even has an example of one that's already filled out. So you've got everything you need there, and it's free. Just have to sign up.
Yeah,
So
if you watch this,
lawfirmsuccessgroup.com.
if you watch this and you don't have a plan and any of that sounded interesting to you, you should go to that website, follow that podcast, and download that sheet and talk to my new good friend, Alay. So again, I'd like to thank Alay Yajnik for joining me on the show today. And thank you to all of our listeners. We hope you enjoyed this conversation, and we will be back with another episode of Everything Except the Law soon. Be sure to check out previous episodes of the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, and the Answering Legal YouTube channel. See you next time, everyone.